Sammy Wilson.
First of all, can I make something clear that as far as my party is concerned, we really don't have a political axe to grind as to whether or not one party performs better than the other, despite the fact that the member from Reigate has been on local radio in Northern Ireland telling people to vote for anybody but the DUP. But we'll not hold that against the party opposite. We want the UK to succeed. We want the UK economy to succeed. And indeed, I think it's in the interest of all of my constituents that the government, whatever the government of the day happens to be, gets the policy right. Because it means that people will have jobs, will have a good standard of living, will have good public services. So we want to see this being got right. And the Chancellor today started off his speech saying that Britain was now walking tall. And he quoted some impressive figures. We had better growth than the rest of Europe and the rest of the G7 countries. We had lower unemployment. We had rising living standards. We were even now selling shares in banks which 6 years ago were bankrupt. And while we may be walking tall in some aspects, there are still parts of the UK economy, and there are still people in the UK economy who are not walking tall. They are stooped under the burden of parts of an economy which are ailing, because, of course, the growth which he has talked about has not been universal. And although he may quote impressive rates of growth for northern areas, I notice he didn't mention Northern Ireland. As I often used to say to economic students, look at the base from which you're starting. And of course, what areas of the United Kingdom were hit most in this recession? It was the northern areas, places like the North East, the North West. I'll give way, yes.
Northern Ireland clearly needs is more private sector industry and activity, and wouldn't he think that a much lower corporation tax rate would be a very good way of promoting that, which is just what this government's giving him?
I want to come on to the point which the member has made, because I'm not going to say that everything which the Chancellor has done is wrong, but what I'm trying to do is to paint a picture that not every region is walking tall. Not every individual has been able to walk tall, because not only are some regions still suffering and stooped under the burden of an ailing economy, there are groups of people who are stooped under the impact of an ailing economy. And whether that's those young people in my constituency who are suffering from youth unemployment, whether it's those in the lower wage brackets and those who are in employment where it is less certain, or where the effect of the economy, the economic downturn has depressed wages most, those people are not experiencing the kinds of living standard increases which the Chancellor has described today. And whilst I welcome the fact that in my own constituency in the last year there are 542 more people who are not on the dole and who are not on welfare, nevertheless, I do get almost every week people coming in telling me that as a result of the recession and as a result of the way employment practices have changed during the recession, many of them are uncertain about their income, they're earning the absolute minimum wage, their job is insecure, and sometimes they get paid, sometimes they don't, because of the kind of contract that they're on, etc. And whilst I know that the Chancellor has said today that the minimum wage is going to be lifted, that some people are going to be lifted out of taxation, nevertheless, that has to be set aside. The fact that for many people, their wages, those gains by government action, are depressed by the employment practices which are becoming more prevalent in parts of the economy and are impacting on those. And of course, banks may be selling shares, but some of that growth and some of the improvement in banks, and certainly I can tell you in Northern Ireland, It has been done by banks quickly foreclosing on those to whom they recklessly lent, and in suppressing businesses instead of giving them the chance to grow. The other thing I would just say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is whilst the economy in the Chancellor's eyes may be walking tall, there are many obstacles along the road which could cause us yet to stumble. I hope that we avoid them. But if you look at some of the information contained in the Red Book, productivity growth is weak, and of course that makes it difficult for real living standards to increase. If there's not increased productivity, then there's not the same chances for wage increases. Exports have not been growing in the way in which the government anticipated, and indeed the 6% deficit, balance of payments deficit, 6% of GDP, will have a deflating impact on the economy. And despite what the Chancellor has said, if we look at his own figures, he is still dependent for future growth, primarily on consumer spending. In other words, we are still dependent upon people taking on the very debt that we have said brought about some of the problems which we are now experiencing. And at the same time, we find that the growth in investment is weak. The growth in private sector investment is going to go up. That's quite right. But over the period of the next budget, according to the OBR forecasts, growth of public sector infrastructure investment, there's actually going to be a 17% reduction in terms of a percentage of GDP. And that's one of the problems that I have with the current policy. Because whilst I understand we cannot, and I have some sympathy, in fact I probably have more sympathy with the arguments which are put from the other side about getting the deficit down, making sure that we don't have huge debt interest, making sure that we have confidence in money markets where we're not having to pay more for the debt that we undertake. However, there are ways in which the government, I believe, can stimulate the economy. And one of the ways in which that can be done is through infrastructure investment. I can't understand why the money markets are more confident about lending us money to pay for welfare benefits than they are to pay for infrastructure development. I think of in my own constituency, some of the infrastructure developments there, a new road from Carrickfergus to Belfast, already that's led to, because of the improved travel times, that's led to investment by companies already in the town which was isolated because of the difficult roads. Titanic, the Titanic project in Belfast, £90 million worth of investment. The return in tourist numbers and the return to the Northern Ireland economy has been terrific. Nearly 1 million visitors in the first year and a half, with the impact that has on local pubs, hotels, restaurants, etc. And we could go on. And why, at a time when we need to stimulate the economy, the government is actually planning to reduce infrastructure investment, which could produce real returns, I can't understand.
One of the ways that the government has announced, the Chancellor has announced today, of helping was the 5-year plan for farmers to spread their profit and loss over 5 years. And for us in Northern Ireland, as an honourable member will know, the dairy industry in particular is having a very difficult time. They had to reinvest for the EU regulations in relation to slurry retention and disposal. They had to also deal with a very clear problem in relation to the price of milk. This announcement by the Chancellor enables the farming industry to at least balance their books over a 5-year period. Does he welcome that as a way forward for the farming industry in Northern Ireland and for those in my constituency and indeed in your own?
There are a number of things, and perhaps he has led me on to a number of things that I don't want to be churlish as far as this budget is concerned. There are a number of things which I do welcome, and given the way in which farming income changes I think it is important that farmers should have the ability to look at their income and spread their profits and losses and the tax that they pay on them over a 5-year period rather than a 2-year period. I welcome the announcement, though I see that there is no timing on it, and maybe the Minister can give us some indication of a requirement to have a universal service obligation for broadband. I'll give way in a moment to. I know that in my own constituency, many small businesses that want to set up in rural areas are held back by the fact that they don't have that means of communication and the easy means of communication.
Could I thank the honourable member for East Antrim for allowing me to intervene and to say that he is making a very compelling argument about the need for investment in infrastructure, and part of that is the whole area of investment in broadband. Would he agree with me that not only is the timescale to be specified an important consideration, but that we have to see the actual geographical locations, because he, like me, will have talked to constituents, particularly those in rural areas, who cannot get access because of topographical reasons?
Well, hopefully a universal service obligation will mean exactly that, a universal service obligation, and that we will see the investment in the infrastructure to include all parts, regardless of how difficult they are. And of course, I also noticed that one of the things will be help with satellite broadband, where the fixed line broadband can't be brought in. I also welcome, especially given the number of young people who come to me looking to find ways of getting their first home, the government's promise to improve the incentives for people to save for the deposit for their first home, and indeed give additional an up to 20% support for those savings. And as one who supports the Fair Fuel campaign, and having a rural constituency where many people don't have the opportunity of using public transport, the announcements today on fuel duty again are to be welcomed. I suppose the fears that we have for the future, especially in Northern Ireland, are as we seek to rebalance the economy. And I welcome the fact that the government has made available to us the corporation tax devolution and the impact which I believe that can have on our own economy. Nevertheless, that must not be counterbalanced by serious public sector cuts, public sector expenditure cuts, especially for an area which is still dependent upon the public sector. It must not be offset by huge cuts in infrastructure. We have already suffered a 40% reduction in infrastructure, public infrastructure investment in Northern Ireland, with devastating effects on the ability to deliver on many of the things that we wished to deliver on. I hope that the optimism which the Chancellor has expressed today actually does come to fruition. But I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there are obstacles. They are highlighted in the Red Book. They've been highlighted in the speech today. There are things, some of them within the government's control, some of them outside the government's control. But I hope that we will walk tall and not find that there are many people and many areas of the United Kingdom who will still be stooped under an economic policy which is not doing its best for Britain.